Just gonna. There you go.
Okay, can everybody see? Can everybody see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Let's go back. So the way this started is Elizabeth and Vicki often come to New York City. Hang on. And so we meet at the French Roast, there's a restaurant up the street from my house, and they asked me to put together a presentation. And I asked the Patagonia people if I could do it there, and we did it in November. They asked me to keep it personal, and I don't know why this is doing this on this, but so here we go. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Where is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge? Well, it's up here in the very northeast corner of Alaska. It's the largest and most northern national wildlife refuge. It's about the size of South Carolina. This area here is designated wilderness. It's one of the largest intact ecosystems anywhere, and there are no introduced species. It's established in 1960. It's over 19 million acres. 8 million acres of that is wilderness. In this area here, as we'll be talking about quite a bit, the coastal plain, the 1002 area, that's about 1.5 million acres. There's 42 fish species, 7 marine mammals, 37 land mammals, and over 200 bird species. But only a handful of those bird species actually spend the whole year in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. That 1002 area, the coastal plain, was set aside in 1980. It was a compromise proposal when President Carter was leaving office. That bill expanded much of the national park land in Alaska, but they left this one area vulnerable to oil drilling. It's the biological and cultural heart of the refuge. The Gwich'in Native people were physically, spiritually, and culturally dependent on the caribou migration who calve in that 1002 area. They have the native slogan for it, which I'm not going to attempt, but it translates to the sacred place where all life begins. So these are my travels in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The first time I went was in this area around here, and I think we saw 1 caribou. But there's something about the place that I've been attracted to come back over and over again. Now, what I want to do is show you something on Google Earth. So this is northern Alaska. This is the Brooks Range. This area over here has been uplifted much later than the western area. These are the highest mountains over here. This area over here is the National Petroleum Reserve, originally named the Naval Petroleum Reserve when the Navy was switching to oil for fuel. And it was named that because it resembled the oil-bearing terrain of Iran. You can see over here, most of the coastal plain, there are many, many lakes out here. If you come over to here, this is the 1002 or coastal plain area. The mountains are much closer to the ocean. And so the grade is much steeper, and this land over here is much drier. And because of this topography is really the reason we're having this conversation tonight. This is why the caribou go there to have their calves. It's why many polar bears go here to build dens. The caribou calve there, it has a lot to do with the Gwich'in people. And it also, this topography also has a lot to do with the probability of oil being in this region. So let's go back. All right, this is a picture of the Turner River near the coast looking south. So what's it like to be there? So you have to fly in by a bush plane. There is the haul road goes by the refuge, but it does not go in the refuge. We have 24 hours of daylight in the summertime. We drink the water right from the stream, and the weather can be very variable. I have been snowed in from July 2 to July 4, but I've also been wearing t-shirts in September up there. The terrain, the walking terrain, it almost seems upside down. Because of the permafrost, the water can actually lay in puddles on the top of a ridge, and down near the streams, the stream will melt the permafrost underneath it and packs the earth down. It could actually be easier walking along the stream than it is along the ridge. So it almost seems counterintuitive to where we live. This is the Gwich'in River Valley looking north. The Gwich'in River is probably the most popular rafting river in the refuge, and it's a huge valley. It's a huge valley. The permafrost, it's about 18 inches underneath the active layer. And what we see here is some ice lenses where the water is squeezed between the active layer and the permafrost. Now out here on the coastal plain, because of the permafrost, the wolves can't dig any dens. These are tussocks, and tussocks are formed from the freezing action of the ground. And Dr. Pelu, she has like 3 different possible explanations on how they're formed. Mostly they have an ice core, they're covered with dirt, and then they're covered with grass, a lot of times with cotton grass. And Dr. Pelu describes them as about the size of a human head. And they're just not sturdy enough to walk on, so you have to walk in between. There can be puddles of water, there can be stringy vegetation in between. You have to lift your legs up. It's a really challenging time to walk across a tussock field like this. So of course we try to avoid this, but not always. After you're up there for a while, you can look out and you can tell sometimes from the color of the vegetation, if you have binoculars, where the good walking might be ahead. But invariably, you run into one of these fields and you get a good workout. It's probably the best work. It's better than a Stairmaster for sure. This is near Adigan Gorge. This area is actually accessible from the Dalton Highway. I think we're a day or 2 in from the highway here. And this is late August, so the colors on the tundra are starting to change. They get these great reds and yellows and grays and browns. The tundra is absolutely beautiful in late August, early September. I think it rivals the East Coast foliage. This is off ice on the Hula Hula River. Off ice forms in the fall. The river begins to freeze. The water dams up behind it. It freezes, dams up behind it, and it spreads out all over the valley and freezes this whole big chunk of ice in the valley. Now in July and August, you can often find spring flowers around here because of that microclimate is still catching on to spring. As a hiker, if you're walking through those tussock fields and then you come to this off ice, it's like a godsend because it's like walking on a sidewalk. And if you have a good stretch of off ice, you can actually make pretty good time. This is midnight sun on the Beaufort Sea. So it's actually looking north on the Beaufort Sea. I've been lucky enough to walk out onto the ocean. When the ice melts, gets further away from shore, in the polar regions, you have a lot of mirages called Fata Morganas. So the ice further out to sea can look like it's a cliff 50 feet high. Mammals. So one of the main mammals we're going to be talking about tonight is the porcupine caribou herd. And it's named the porcupine caribou herd because they cross the Porcupine River. And you can see that the population can fluctuate quite a bit. So in 2017, they had 218,000 animals. They migrate to the coastal plain in May and June. The cows come first and the bulls follow behind. The calves are born in a few-day period in early June. And most of them all are born in just a few-day period. And the core calving area is this 1002 area of the coastal plain. And part of the reason is that, remember the topography, it's a little bit drier than the rest of the coastal plain. It has highly nutritious grasses. And the caribou cows need this for their milk. Their milk is 20% fat. which is the highest fat content of any land mammal. Polar bears have a higher fat content, but they're considered marine mammals. Okay, the porcupine caribou herd, there's several herds in Alaska. This particular herd has the largest large mammal land migration on Earth. And the cows are driven to get to the calving grounds. In George Caleb's book, he talks about if they're slowed down because of snow or other conditions, they will drop their calves along the migration route and they'll get up and move as soon as they can. The little calves are about 12, 13 pounds. And on day 2, they can outrun a man. Even so, if they have to migrate with the herd, they have heavy snows, some very treacherous rivers to cross, and they can get trampled by the herd. Also, they're not where the nutritious grasses are, and they're also closer to predators. If they do make it to the calving ground on time, you know, these gregarious animals who travel in this big herd, they spread out. The cows are wary of just about everything during calving season. So they spread out to have maybe 10 or 20 per square mile. Now they're wary of me, they're wary of industrial roads, pipelines, oil drills, and they're even wary of other cows. And again, they come here because of these highly nutritious grasses, and they're a little bit further away from predators. This is a picture of cotton grass, just so you know what it looks like. Now the predators include wolves, bears, golden eagles, and wolverines. So a golden eagle can pick up one of these small calves. The wolves cannot den near the coastal plain because of the permafrost, so they den further south, but they do travel up there. And when they do kill some calves, according to Caleb's book again, sometimes they'll just eat the brain, the tongue, and the milk curd of the calf's stomach. And they'll go on and kill another calf. Now, the most common bones we see are caribou jaw bones. And Yana's company does a trip to a wolf sanctuary in New Jersey. And I learned there that the wolves can chew just about every bone but the teeth. And so that's why we see a lot of jaw bones up there. And that really kind of came true for me. So this is the health snapshot of the porcupine caribou herd. Now, cows can have a calf in about year 4, I believe. So, but you can see here, this statistic here, a little over a third of them survive their first winter. These are collared caribou, and they track their movements. And so this is actually pretty cool, I think. But just so you know, this here is the Porcupine River. And I want to pull this back, if I can. Stop. So you can see at the end of June, almost the entire herd is in this coastal plain 1002 area. Some of the belligerent bulls are still coming along behind, but almost the entire herd is in this one region. And so after the calves are born, the cows will spend a few days, again, separated from the other cows, bonding with that calf. And a few days later, then they'll go and join the rest of the herd. Then the bulls come along a little bit later in the month, and then the mosquitoes come out. And when the mosquitoes come out, the caribou get into these large herds called the post-calving aggregations. And you do have to get away from the mosquitoes. So this is a group of bulls on the off ice on the Achillik. They'll go out onto the ice just to get away from mosquitoes. They'll face the wind. They'll go down by the coast. They can lose up to a quart of blood. And remember, these animals are 200-300 pounds. They're not much bigger than a human. That's a lot of blood. One time we saw a herd come out of a valley and it was a patch of snow, and within 15 minutes, that patch of snow was just covered with caribou. There's many other insects too that give them a really hard time, so I think they like the winter better than summer, but that's where the grass is, that's where they have their calves. These are caribou trails. You see these in many places in the Arctic. You can even see them on solid rock. Caribou have been traveling up to the calving area for thousands of years. So they over the years, they form these paths. They don't always go the same way. They don't go, follow in a straight line, but these paths are all over the place. These are some bulls in velvet. This is, I think, early July. So polar bears den along the coast. And remember, the mountains are close to the sea, and so it's a little bit steeper. The rivers dig a little bit deeper into the tundra. So let's just look at this area right here, and we'll go to Google Earth, and I'll show you. So you can see the bank of the river here is much steeper. So when the snow starts to fall and the wind begins to blow, it drifts up along these banks, and this is where the polar bears come and dig their dens. I want to go back here. And of course, the melting sea ice is a problem for the polar bears too. Many of them are summering along the coast here. These are Dall sheep. This is we camped on the Conga Cut one night, and this is a salt lick. So they came down to lick the salt off these rocks. This is a wolverine. I have been lucky enough to see 4 wolverines in my life. I got pretty close to this one. This guy just came bouncing right by me. He was not afraid of me. He was not threatening me. He's just going about his own business. Very lucky to see that. This is an ermine. We had lunch one time along the Adigan Gorge, and this guy came out of a rock and put on a little show for us. Very cute little guy. I think I like that picture. This is a grizzly bear shot by my friend Mo Brown, Dr. Mo Brown. We're all standing there watching this bear eat these blueberries. These maroon colored leaves here are blueberries, and he's just going to town on these blueberries, and we're standing there with our binoculars and camera. He got up and took a look at us, and he took off in the other direction, which is kind of how I like to see a grizzly bear. These are muskox. Now, muskox are large mammals about the size of a cow, really, and they are one of the few large mammals that actually spend, the only really large mammal that spends the entire year in the Arctic National, on the coastal plain. They have a wool that is underneath. They have some long guard hairs here, and then they have some wool underneath, and it comes off in the summertime when they go through the willow thickets. And you can pick it up. And that wool is supposedly 11 times warmer than sheep's wool, and it's very soft. Many people compare it to cashmere. But they don't move very much. One time on the Jago, we saw a couple muskox, and we went and did like a 10-day loop around. We came back, and they had moved about 200 yards. So. Okay, now birds migrate from all over the world to breed in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Many of them are ground nesters, and so some of the ground nesters, they'll feign an injury when you get too close to the nest, like a broken wing, and that will entice the predator to chase them instead of to go after the nest. So we're walking along one day, and a sandhill crane is doing the broken wing dance. And we look down and we see these 2 eggs, and so we hightailed it out of there. We didn't want to disturb the nest. But a sandhill crane is a pretty big bird for doing that broken wing dance. Now, birds migrate from all over the United States to breed in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Much of that reason is there's 24 hours of daylight and there's lots of bugs and they get away from some of the predators. So in New York City, for instance, a robin will take 12 days to go from egg to fledge out of the nest. But up in the Arctic, where there's all that daylight and all those bugs and the parents can feed those chicks 24 hours a day, they fledge in 8 days. A lot of people say, what do I care about the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge? I'm never going to go there. But you can see from this graph here that, you know, our neighborhoods are connected to that. Now, not only do birds come from all over the United States, but they come from all over the world to breed up there. This is really a maternity ward up here on the coast. We all know about the Arctic tern, but here's another interesting one. This is the northern wheatear. It's a small songbird, and it flies all the way to Africa and back every year. It's the longest songbird migration on Earth. And this bar-tailed godwit here, this is an amazing journey. They fly nonstop from Alaska to New Zealand. It's like 7 days for them to get there. It's just an amazing, amazing feat, and they hit it. I mean, we know people can't find the Starbucks on the corner. They hit New Zealand from Alaska. This is an eider nest along the Arctic coast. This eider down is some of the warmest down you can find. The Vikings used to grab a little bit of it and throw a little grass in there. So I learned that the other day. It's a tundra swan nest. This is a rough-legged hawk nest. I went over and I snapped this picture and I got out of there. And when I got home, I realized, okay, there's 2 chicks. But the parents have also filled the pantry here with some lemmings. So there's at least 3 lemmings here, maybe 4. Also on this same cliff was a gyrfalcon nest, and it was really not that far away from this nest. So it was quite an evening we had that night. The plants have a short growing season. They have 60 to 80 days to sprout, flower, and seed. And many of the plants are ground huggers, one because of the frozen ground, also because if you measure the temperature near the surface of the tundra and 1 meter above, it can be several degrees Celsius warmer near the surface. Now, there's a burst of color. If we go up there in June, we'll get there, it'll be brown and patches of snow. And by the time we leave, 2 weeks later, there's just a burst of color. Everything just pops out, all these flowers pop out, things turn green. It's just amazing. It's not a wasteland as some people claim it to be. This is an Arctic poppy. Arctic poppies track the sun like a sunflower. And you can take a thermometer, and we have, put it inside this flower, and it's 3 degrees Celsius warmer than outside the flower. So the bugs go in there to warm up, then they go to the next flower to warm up, and that's their pollination strategy. That's how they pollinate the flower, by warming the bugs. This is a dwarf birch. This is a tree. It only grows a few inches above the ground. It can live up to 80 years or more. This is moss campion. I don't really have a story for it. It's just a beautiful flower. When we're in the Arctic, we end up spending a lot of time looking at flowers. First of all, they're under our feet everywhere. And second of all, they don't move as much as the animals do. So we spend a lot of time identifying flowers and looking at flowers. And it's a great thing to do. After dinner, we'll be out for hours just looking at flowers and anything else that moves. These are blueberries. So blueberries seem to be many, many places. And if you're hiking along, you take a short break and you just reach over and grab a few blueberries. It's a great snack. You can collect them when you come into camp and have them for dessert, or if there's any left, you could have them for breakfast. Oftentimes, too, you'll see people accidentally sit down on some blueberries and they'll have, little blue, purple stains all over their pants at that time of year. People. So the Gwich'in people are culturally, ethnically, physically, cultural, social, and economically dependent on the 1002 area for their livelihood. They get up to their 80% of their diet from caribou. Now, I can't really speak for the Gwich'in people. They have asked us, Sierra Club Alaska Outings, not to go on the coastal plain during calving season because it's sacred to them, and we are abiding by their wishes. I think another webinar will be good just to hear what the Gwich'in people have to say about what's going on up there. I mean, I don't want to speak for them. I think they should speak for themselves, but their religion is based on caribou. And if we disturb the caribou, if we destroy the caribou, they said it would be comparable to the genocidal acts that brought the plains buffalo to the brink of extinction and violated the very heart of the Plains tribes' ancestral way of life. They're seeing it as a genocidal argument, and I think that's a very valid argument. And I hope things turn out. Threats. So the major threat is fossil fuel extraction. These are seismic testing tracks from the 1980s. So they have like a tractor that goes along and makes a big vibration to thump into the ground. And these we only go back, over these things one time. So the Arctic is a harsh environment, but it's also quite fragile. So these tracks will be around for a long time. And when they talk about seismic threat testing, they want to do that in the winter. Well, that big vibration is not going to sit well with, hibernating polar bears. That's really going to disturb them. This is a few slides of oil development in the Arctic. So you can see here that most of the oil extraction is in this area here. Over here is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and here's the National Petroleum Reserve. This is, I think Jenny was talking about this. This is the Arctic drilling from space. You can see that this industrial complex up here is almost as bright as Seattle, Tacoma. These are, again, some more seismic testing tracks. As Sierra Club hikers, we're concerned about spending more than 2 nights in one campsite, the impact that'll have on the tundra. We don't walk in single file, so it doesn't have an impact on the tundra. So industrial development is going to have a major impact on the tundra. So this is the pollution that is produced in this industrial complex up there in Prudhoe Bay. You see that's 3 times more nitrogen oxide than Washington, D.C. And look at all this greenhouse gas that is produced up there. This is a lot of greenhouse gas produced so they can extract a product that produces more greenhouse gases. We have about 1 oil spill a day. Some are small, some are large. There's a lot of hazardous waste pits that have to be cleaned up yet. Excuse me. Now this is a list of the facilities that are up there in Prudhoe Bay. What I wanted to show from this is, you hear the argument about, drilling on the coastal plain, that it's only going to take a 2,000 acre footprint. That's actually very disingenuous, because that 2,000 acres is just this part here. This doesn't include the area in between here. This is not wilderness anymore. This is not wild anymore. The caribou calves are wary of the caribou cows are wary of other cows when they have their calves. They're not going to go in here. They're going to go to more marginal areas to have their calves, and where there's more predators, and they're going to have a higher calf mortality rates. So the 2,000 acre thing is very disingenuous. And they know from studies in the central Arctic herd that this does affect the caribou. The coastal plain, oil deposits. So there is oil underneath the coastal plain, obviously Prudhoe Bay. That was caused, tectonic plates colliding and created in Prudhoe Bay what explorationists call an elephant. That's a big, giant puddle of oil. But remember when I was talking about the eastern part of the Brooks Range has been uplifted much, much later than that. Let me see if I can demonstrate it. So this is the Gwich'in deposit here. This is where the oil is. So this is the central Arctic slope. So this is somewhat uplifted, and these are the petroleum deposits over near Prudhoe Bay. Over here in this coastal plain area, the 1002 area, we still have this little bit of this Gwich'in deposit, but most of it has been uplifted and eroded off. So there may be pockets of oil here, but it's going to take a lot more destruction to get to them. There are going to be more roads, more pipelines, and is it even profitable to do so? Then they talk about American jobs. Well, you can see here, I know in the 1970s, the people in Pittsburgh and Youngstown were not too happy about the fact that all that pipe and all that infrastructure was Japanese steel. Climate change. Well, I'm not to talk too much about this. Obviously, burning fossil fuels contributes to global warming. But also, as the climate warms, we have an earlier spring and a later fall. So some of that permafrost can melt. Permafrost is mostly organic matter, and that'll start to decompose and release methane. It also affects the caribou. There could be more snows and prevent the cows from getting to the calving ground. There could be freezing rain, so the rain will come down and freeze the surface of the earth and freeze the vegetation, and the caribou can't break through it to eat. Polar bears too. As the sea ice melts, polar bears live on the ice. They eat seals. They're not very good at being a vegetarian. So this is, let's see here. This is a demonstration of the melting sea ice. And also pay attention to the multi-year sea ice over here. So you can see in 1984, the sea ice was pretty close to the Arctic coast, the Alaskan coast. So, this is a long way for a polar bear to swim. They can swim 80 miles, but that's a long way. And certainly a cub can't make it that far. So what can you do to keep it a refuge? You can do what you can with what you have where you are. So if there's online petitions to sign, if you can donate a little money, if you can write a letter, an email, whatever we can do. You think that signing this petition is not going to make a difference, but not signing it can make a difference. So it doesn't take very long. Do what you can. And these organizations, Northern Alaska Environmental Center, Trustees for Alaska, the Sierra Club, and the Gwich'in Steering Committee, these people are on the front line trying to save this area. They need our support, if not financially, verbally, whatever we can do to help them out. Patagonia Action Works is another good place to go for petitions, etc. There is one on Patagonia Action Works right now from the Sierra Club, and they're trying to prevent banks and insurance companies from providing capital for drilling in the Arctic. The one out there right now is a petition to Bank of America. And this is my best JFK pose. So Yana, do I hand it back to you now?
I got it. Thank you so much, Gary. That was fascinating and It was amazing to learn about all the animals and the birds and just all the wildlife, plant life that calls that place home. I think especially for those of us who live maybe on the East Coast or just in the lower 48, there aren't a lot of really truly wild places, especially of that magnitude. So that was amazing. Thank you so much. And, just to mention something that Gary was saying as far as petitions, they do work. There are companies now, financial companies that are not financing certain projects in the Arctic. So um, just bringing it back to Gary's point that what you do or don't do can absolutely make a difference. Um, and now we'd love to open it up for questions. So how we'd like to do this is on your Zoom, there's a feature that says raise your hand. So if you have a question, if you don't mind raising your hand, and I'm just going to scroll through participants and I'm just going to unmute you one at a time and say your name and just say, go ahead with your question. But I think the first question that we have is already typed out, so I'm just going to read it. And the question is there a difference between caribou and reindeer?
Yeah, actually, they're the same species, okay? Reindeer are domesticated caribou, but they're actually the same Latin name.
Very nice. All right, so if anybody has a question, raise your hand on the participants app, and I will scroll through. Oh, we have a question from James. If he can come with you, Gary. James, I already asked Gary, so I'm first in line. Thank you for your question.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Can I ask, Bernadette and Vicki and Mike and Elizabeth, what's most effective for us to do in order to help save this place?
Who wants to start?
Why don't you start?
Well, thank you, everybody. And again, I'm Mike Scott. I'm with the Sierra Club. Right now we are in a difficult situation with the current administration, as I think everybody probably knows. And so we have been focusing, as was noted earlier, a lot of our campaigning work on corporations. I think right now, in this particular moment, one of the most important things people can do is contact Bank of America. Currently, we have 5 out of the 6 largest American financial institutions have committed to not financing drilling in the Arctic, and Bank of America is one of the last ones. This is actually critical work because what we're hearing and what we suspect is that the larger oil companies are probably not interested in moving into the Arctic, and those are the companies that have the ability, they have assets there, but that's not where expansion is going on. And what that means is the mid-sized to smaller oil companies are the ones who theoretically would be going after a lease should it come up, and we suspect that a lease might be available this fall, or at least by December. Those companies will require some outside financing, and the large 6 banks, if we can have them all locked up into a policy that says they will not finance corporate drilling, it sends a message to those companies that the money won't be available for them, which maybe could forestall leasing if nobody's there to bid on it. And 2, it sends a message to other smaller banks that these institutions, through their risk analysis, are saying that this is a bad business move. And that's critical too, because that can help take the smaller financial institutions who might give money for Arctic drilling out of the picture as well. So to me, one of the most important things people can do in the next couple months is get involved in the corporate campaigning side of things. And I'll actually put a link in the chat that is, you can follow that link to send an email to Bank of America and also get onto our lists. In the next, really the next couple months is going to be a critical time. So we're going to be asking people to do quite a bit when it comes to Bank of America over this time period, because we think if we're going to get a policy from them, it's probably going to happen before October, because they're unlikely to make that big of a move before the election. So that's what I'd suggest people do right now. Other folks probably have some other thoughts on different avenues that we could approach here as well.
Bernadette Demente Faji, Gwich'in Eastleigh. My name is Bernadette, and I'm from Fort Yukon. I'm the executive director of the Gwich'in Steering Committee, and we were founded in 1988 by our elders and chiefs of the Gwich'in Nation to protect the coastal plain. It's the calving grounds of the porcupine caribou herd. To our people, it's called Gwich'in Gondai Gotlit, the sacred place where life begins. I ask everybody to share that this is not just you know, about animals, it's about human rights also. It's about our food security. Right now, like literally, we are having shortage on our fish. We depend on our land animals. We, you know, share that there's actual people that are being impacted. Don't give up on Congress, you know, just continue to educate them and let them know that you support protecting one of the last untouched ecosystems in the world. And share our story. You know, I appreciate you saying that you don't want to speak for us, but just share our story, share the our website. It's ourarcticrefuge.org. We also have a youth council. This has been over a 30-year fight, and I, you know, this is my grandson, and that's who I'm doing this for. I want our children to have a place in our homelands. I want them to be able to hunt and fish and live off of the land that I've survived off of. And we have had a spiritual and cultural connection to the porcupine caribou herd for over 40,000 years. And, you know, it really makes me, I just want to say thank you, Masit Cho, on behalf of our people for sharing that, you know, putting the Gwich'in into your presentation, because a lot of people don't do that. They don't understand, and it is about the animals, and that is one of the things that we are so interconnected to everything up here, to the water, to the land, to all the animals, and they can't speak for themselves. That's why we're here. They can't tell us that they're sick. They can't tell us that they're suffering. They can't tell us that we're ruining their habitat. So that is why we, as Gwich'in people, as indigenous people of these areas, that's why we stand up, because that, if you look around the world right now, it's a scary time. This is our survival. You know, and so we just want to, you know, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And just remember that this is a human rights issue as well. So let's see.
Thank you, Bernadette.
Oh, thank you so much, Bernadette. Good evening. My name's Elizabeth, and I am the Executive Director of the Northern Alaska Environmental Center. And I just want to thank Bernadette and Yana and Gary for being here this evening. I'm calling in from my home on the unceded territory of the Lower Tanana Dene peoples, and our organization recognizes the traditional stewards of these lands, and I just really feel honored and lucky to be here with you all tonight. And one of the things that our organization focuses on is education and advocacy. And so this is an election year, and although our organization does not do any electioneering, we do really encourage people to not only get out and vote, but to encourage all of your friends your family to not only vote, but make sure the places that you want to see protected are on the minds and on the hearts of your local and your regional and your national leadership. And so one of the things that we can do right now is really make sure that the issue of permanently protecting the Arctic Refuge is at the forefront for environmental protections. And like Bernadette said, this is a human rights issue. And that conversation now more than ever is really at the forefront of people's minds, and that lands that were traditionally stewarded, folks that have been in these places for millennia, are fighting to survive. And so how we can stand in solidarity with those groups is hugely important. And so more than ever is being a part of presentations like this, and then just sharing the word. And I'm sure Gary would love to do more of these to more and more audiences of your friends and family. And so that's one of the bigger pieces for us, is just getting the word out and sharing this. It starts small, and it starts with a trusted audience. And so those folks that you're closest to are those that are going to listen to you. And so we really appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I am Vicki Clark. I am the Executive Director at Trustees for Alaska. And I'm speaking to you from Anchorage, Alaska, which is in the unceded territory of the Dena'ina people, and specifically Eklutna tribes, the Eklutna tribe. And the work that Trustees has done, we've been a force in the legal realm since 1974. So we've been around for 45 years, working to protect these amazing places in Alaska. And we have worked with the Gwich'in Steering Committee for decades to protect this place. And for so long, the fight had been in Congress. And with this administration, we are dealing with decisions being made at the administrative level to actually get leasing and permitting done in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So this is huge. They changed the law to actually make oil and gas a purpose of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. That is unacceptable. So we are the lawyers for the conservation community, for Native villages and organizations across the state to protect these places, to, as Bernadette says, as people, we can go to court, the animals cannot. We can speak for them through the laws and protect these places. And Alaska is a pretty hostile environment politically, given our reliance on oil money, which we need to change. We need to diversify the funding in Alaska, and that is coming home to roost, as we're seeing. But in the meantime, there is just such a steamrolling to get into the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So we are not getting help from our governor, from the congressional delegation, which for us is 2 senators and a congressman. Those folks do not help us with protecting this place. And so we need the help of folks in the lower 48 to help us protect this place, and putting pressure on your legislators and Congress people, as well as getting involved in the campaign against leasing and the corporate campaign with Sierra Club. These are all great things to be doing to really keep these wild places wild and protected. And as Elizabeth said, voting is very important. So thank you all so much for being here. Gary puts on a great presentation with a lot of really great information to help understand what this place is, who it's supporting, and that's just super helpful. So thank you all for being here with us today to learn more and get involved.
Are we allowed to pipe in?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Aloha, Gary.
again.
My wife and I went on two 12-day trips with Gary in the 90s in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. One was a Jago and a Chillik Loop. The other was a run down to Hula Hula. And I want to just share a few thoughts and things we saw for those of you who haven't had a chance to see what's all up there. One of the things that I still recall is the Arctic tern that was circling over us as we were rafting through the off ice on the Hula Hula. And then some years later, I had a case in Palau and I saw an Arctic tern. And then some years after that, we hiked in Patagonia down in Torres del Paine, and there were Arctic terns. You can see things there. I noticed there wasn't an Arctic tern on your graph, Gary.
No, I didn't have. Well, yeah, the green arrow was.
Okay. And then we saw a wolf would walk right by our tents, and like we weren't even there, didn't move us much. We struggled through those tussocks, and the bears and the wolves, they just glide through it. They're made for the place. The deer falcons, ptarmigans, and then we pitched tents on the Chillik one night. And the next morning we got up, and all of a sudden there's a hullabaloo around one tent. Turns out there was a pileated plover had pitched its nest right next to the tent. It had said nothing while the tent was being put up, but was doing its broken arm dance as we tried to take down the tents to try to draw us away from the eggs. It's a fascinating place. In those days, the ice on the north end was up not too far from the barrier islands as we rafted out from the Hula Hula. And the mist was coming in, and we were always concerned about the polar bears coming ashore in the mist and not seeing them. So many fascinating things. And I want to say, Gary, thank you so much for all your education. And it was fun to relive it with you on this talk.
Hey, thanks for joining, Ken. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Like Bernadette and Elizabeth and Vicky and Mike and Gary all said, really spreading the information and spreading awareness is really, really important. So thank you for being here. I will send up a follow-up email to everybody. So if you're interested in learning more about these organizations that support the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, if you're interested in making a donation, all that information will be available to you. And just be very grateful to you for taking the time out of your evening to join us. And if you have any more questions, we'll stick around for a few more minutes. But thank you for coming and have a great rest of your week.